Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be sharing a new article written by Jordan Hall. In my previous video, I shared another article, very interesting. And I want to share a new one I read on the medium.com website community recently. And this time, the title of this article is Thinking and Simulated Thinking. As I said in my previous video, Jordan Hall is a truly sharp mind. He has an original and innovative ideas, and it will be demonstrated, reading this article. And he has also a deep and complex concept, as well as an acute and appropriate exceptional vocabulary. So let's share this article on thinking and simulated thinking by Jordan Hall. I would like to explore what I think is a useful distinction between thinking and a quite different phenomenon that might be referred to as simulation of thinking. First, a quick clarification of two core concepts, and this is easy. If you remember learning how to drive a car or to ride a bike, you likely recall transitioning from the uncertain, unsure, exploratory moment of early learning to increasingly effortless unconscious process that now allows you to drive from work to home without even noticing that you did so. In the first case, learning, we are in a costly, awkward, and error-prone explore mode. This mode is really rather terrible at getting things done. But when you find yourself in a novel environment or in need of innovating new tools or technique, explore mode is precisely the right place to be. Once you have mapped the territory and have identified the things to look out for, stoplight and the appropriate response to those things, red light means stop. It is time to move to habit mode. Habit is really rather terrible and exploring reality, creativity, and innovation, but it is fast and allows for efficient optimization. This transition from conscious learning to unconscious habit is commonplace and extraordinarily useful. Any well-functioning human will transition between these two modes countless times in their lives. The problem that I'm noticing in the contemporary environment is that we seem to have run aground on a very dangerous reef. We have replaced authentic thinking, a fluid use of both explore mode and habit mode, with a simulation of thinking, a form of habit mode that represents itself as the totality of thinking. Simulated thinking shows up as thinking, takes itself as thinking, and armed with a vast and often nuanced script of a predefined signal and appropriate responses, even resembles thinking. But it is not. It is habit, not learning. and as a consequence, it is completely incapable of creatively responding to changes in actual reality. Broadly speaking, we have become stuck in simulated thinking. And this is extremely dangerous. In fact, I'd like to invite you to consider that this might be the central problem of, the moment. To be sure, a whole lot of ideology floating about these days is a mess, and we will have to deal with that as well. But without thinking, we can't even really take the first step. We are trapped using all the tools to solve a new problem, and that can't end well. How did we get here? A huge amount of early childhood is spent in explore mode, learning to work, learning to talk, learning to pick up a pea and put in your mouth. You can't be taught any of these. You just have to use explore mode and learn it. Explore mode is largely responsible for all fundamental learning, for exploring your environment and forming novel insights and responses to that environment. But, and here is precisely where things start to go wrong. It is possible in some cases to move from learning to being taught. A classic is the good old multiplication table. Who among us learn multiplication? I don't mean use the rote repetition to carve it as a deep habit. I mean well and deeply came to grasp the fundamental essence of the multiply for yourself. My sense is that the answer is practically no one. If your only relationship with multiplication is the ability to rapidly answer the question like what is 5 times 5 or what is 9 times 9, you have turned multiplication in something that can be processed with habit mode. In the effort to accelerate and normalize the contents of a mind, our society has chosen to apply habit mode to the multiplication table. Fair enough, and in fact, maybe the right way to relate to the subject. It is an effective way to do basic multiplication, but it isn't thinking. And here is the problem. In society, it is often the case that most of the things that you need to know were figured out a long time ago. You could rediscover them for yourself, but for the most part of that is an exercise in efficiency. Certainly, this is not the sort of thing that a school striving to cram as much knowledge as possible into its student could go about doing. Instead, the efficient answer to the threat, all knowledge as a version of a multiplication table, a sort of a prefab script relating possible inputs, 3 times 3 and appropriate output, 9. Who was the 60th President of the United States? What is the atomic weight of hydrogen? What is the meaning of Walt Whitman's self-contradiction? What is the appropriate relationship between individual liberty and common interest? Perceive possible inputs, scan available outputs, faithfully report on the most appropriate response, quickly, reliably, speed and precision, the sort of thing that habit mode was designed for. Do this long enough, and your native capacity begin to atrophy. And in our modern environment, this is how we end up spending nearly all our time. Anyone who has played a computer or console game can almost feel the shift from learning to habit. For the first little bit, there is learning. You are exploring the shape and possibly a possibility of the game environment. But, and this is deeply crucial, no matter how complicated a game is, it is ultimately no more than merely complicated. Unlike nature, which is fundamentally complex, every game can be gamed. After only a little while, you get a feel for how it works and then begin the process into of turning it into habit, into quickly and efficiently running the right response to the right inputs. At a formal level, computer games precisely teach you to move as quickly as possible from learning to habit and then to maximally optimize habit. Television and film. Here is the problem. The problem is even more crisp. Learning requires feedback. It requires the ability to play with your environment and test experiment with how you slowly developing ideas relate to the world. You learn how to talk by trying to talk. If you babble, ma ma ma, and this grabs the attention of that nice lady, you have done something right. But television, no amount of yelling at your TV is going to change the course of events. Warn as you like, the teenager are still going to go into basement. Try out your new smile all you like. Neither Barney nor Big Bird is going to respond in the slightest. So, what does broadcast media teach at a formal level? The development environment of a broadcast teaches that nuanced emotion and feeling, the primal toolkit of thinking, are largely irrelevant, that your ability to skillfully sense and respond to the world has little to no effect, and that the correct only use of your agency is to select from a prefab menu of possible choices what shows are on, what is my favorite show, and then to respond appropriately, laugh when the laugh trace tells you that funny happened, cower when the sound track tells you that scary is happening, change the channel when you are bored. And this brings us back to school. School is by and large formally broadcast. It is a rare student who doesn't learn, and sadly, this lessons is probably an example of real learning. And that their job is not to think, it's to listen attentively to find out what the prefab set of inputs are and then to carve the correct responses into a nice habit. Just the thing to get an A plus in a 60 minute exam quickly, reliably. Note that none of these cases have to be this way. Minecraft puts a lot of more genuine learning into gaming than Candy Crush. Someone who takes television as a subject of media studies or who actually participates in filmmaking is learning. And nearly everyone has experienced blissfully moment of real learning in school. It is possible to create authentic learning environments. We just, broadly speaking, haven't done so as a society. And why we are at it? How about the social environment itself? Well, consider real relationships take a lot of time at, and they require a lot of changing context. You don't really know a person until you've been on a journey with them. Our modern environment provides very little of that. Instead, we keep disrupting relationship, different classes, different grades, going away to college, going away from a job, and embedding them over and over again in the same kind of a simulated thinking environments. And then there is a social media, perhaps the example par excellence of a thin and fabricated environment. Please like this post. I might say, please like this video and don't forget to follow me, to subscribe. And this result is that the precious few of our social relationship, particularly during childhood and adolescence, are generative of real learning and thinking. Instead, most of our time is spent gaming social groups, figuring out how to fit in by becoming sensitive to good opinion and how to craft and simulate an identity that works for the ephemeral social group that we happen to be swimming with. When you have reached the point that keeping it real is itself a performative simulation, you have a pretty good idea where you are. When you look at how we really spend almost all of our time, it isn't hard to figure out how we got here. We are born thinking, and then we are immersed like Achilles in an environment that is omnipresently pushing us to optimize for simulated thinking. And this is a deep problem at human level, but it is an even bigger problem at a social level. And under the current trajectory of exponential technology, it is likely a catastrophic problem at the species level. In fact, as long as the frame of prefab pattern and responses, that you carve into habit is actually adaptive to the real environment, simulated thinking ability to quickly and reliably apply those responses can be really rather effective. For a while, it can make things pretty easy and can superficially show up as a golden age. The problem is that habit mode can't adapt to changing circumstances. If your environment changes, and it will change, you aren't able to move into an exercise learning mode, you are in deep trouble. Habit mode is a useful tool. Simulated thinking is a trap. It presents itself as real thinking and separates us from our ability to learn and to adapt. Our environment is changing rapidly. In fact, I think it is fair to say that there has never been time when we needed to be able to learn and adapt more than right now. Now, more than ever, we need to be thinking. So why aren't we rediscovering thinking? We are. Consider, for example, the way that attention is moving from legitimate arbiters of good opinion to odd, unusual people like Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, Brett and Eric Weinstein. Something is happening, but it's going slowly. Why? Consider how real thinking shows up to simulated thinking rather than quickly and reliably returning the right result for the right input. Like a good habit, thinking begins awkwardly. Early on, thinking will struggle to generate anything at all. Simulated thinking can dance and dazzle, why thinking is just learning how to work. Moreover, as it matures, the result of thinking will look entirely unlike the appropriate output that simulate thinking is expecting. As a consequence, for the most part, thinking will show up as some combination of error, disability, and bad attitude. In fact, at a social level, thinking will often show up as hostile. In a social environment largely conditioned by role play, identities that allow you to fit in, thinking will be sending everything but the right signal. If you are not demonstrated good opinion and responding correctly to the right signal, you won't show up as being a part of the group. And if you aren't part of the group, of the in group, when you must be in the out group. Simulated thinking is limited to its prefab script. As a consequence, it doesn't have a good ways to respond to the novelties and satires of a real thinking. It, if it interprets thinking as error, it might select a response of dismiss or debunk. If it interprets thinking as hostile, it might select a response of attack or defend, or scapegoat, or witch hunt. The more sophisticated the scripts, the more effectively simulated thinking will be able to react to limit and extinguish real thinking. After all, it has the weight of almost the entire population on its side. To think in an environment infected with the simulated thinking is almost to invite a witch hunt. But thinking as reality on its side, the more reality drifts from the environment that the script of a simulated thinking we are designed for, the more errors the simulation will throw. The glitches in the matrix will become both more obvious and more egregious. By contrast, as thinking starts to get itself sorted out, it becomes more adaptive to changing reality. What first looked like errors start to look more and more like insight. And thinking as a nature of its side. Explore mode is fundamental part of our human toolkit. We all start with it, and while our environment can separate us from thinking, it can't remove the capacity altogether. Anyone who chooses to can relearn learning, not without effort, and until there is a critical mass of other folks taking the same journey, not without social consequences, but it can be done. And here is the final point. Thinking, real thinking, is collaborative. It doesn't just tolerate different perspectives, it absolutely requires them. We humans are only really thinking we are when we are doing so in a community. Our individual lives and experiences are just too narrow and limited to really provide the context and the capacity necessary for making sense of the unknown, for wandering to desert, for a journey to chaos. Thus, as you become more capable of real thinking, you also become more capable of a real collaboration, of real community, and of a real relationship, and thence of real thinking. It is a virtuous cycle. So, while the going has been slow, it is no surprise that those people who have begun crossing the adaptive valley to thinking are beginning to find each other. And when they do, they are bridging across the identities and the prefab responses of our old script and routine. It has been slow going, but it's picking up steam, accelerating. The train is leaving. Time to start thinking. And this is, you know, quite interesting article, I think, about, and we have to think that we are living in a society of misinformation, fake news, where our emotion and our relations are dictated by simulated thinking, by media, by authoritarianism. And so we need to have the ability to discern and being able to thinking. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.